Hello, and you're watching UATV. We've got you covered for the Ukrainian 2019 presidential elections. Ukrainians are casting their ballots to choose their next president. Incumbent President Petro Poroshenko and comedian Volodymyr Zelensky are the two candidates. More than 30,000 polling stations open their doors all over the country, and about 30 million Ukrainians are eligible to vote in these elections. To discuss the outcomes of Ukraine's presidential elections, we're joined in the studio by Petro Burkovskiy. He's an analyst at the Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Good evening, and thank you too.
So, what can you tell us about the election so far that you've seen and some analysis that you have?
You mean the analysis of the exit polls or of the process, of the campaign?
Well, we'll get to the exit polls a bit later, but so far what you've seen, how the election has been happening.
Before the runoff, there was a campaign, quite intensive fight between different candidates, and just at the end of the January, it appeared that there will be a kind of surprise for all of the old guard, for the old politicians, that the newcomer, the person with virtually no political experience, is having an upper hand and is advancing towards the first place. So before that, major politicians fight with each other, meaning Poroshenko against Tymoshenko, or Tymoshenko against all, and everybody was fighting against all, while Zelensky was a kind of in a shadow. But right after the end of the January and during the February and March, a lot of attention was driven towards the figure of Zelensky, and only in March he faced a kind of more serious struggle. However, we should admit it that he succeeded not to be engaged into this fight, and actually these tactics worked even during the runoff in the last 3 weeks of the electoral campaign.
It's been quite intense. It's been covered by international media. Everybody's keeping a close eye on the election process. Would you say this is a great opportunity for Ukraine to show that even a comedian could potentially become the leader of the country, and this is all part of the democratic process?
I would say that the democratic process is that a lot of people in Ukraine and
just to interrupt you there. On screen now we have the exit poll data released at 8 p.m. Kiev time. So Volodymyr Zelensky is leading with 73.2%, and the incumbent president Petro Poroshenko 25.3%. Now, would you say that this could have been expected, or do you think the margin, the difference between the two candidates is too wide?
The margin is tremendous, and I would say that's a tremendous defeat for the incumbent, of course. And if we return back to your question about the democratic nature of Ukrainian elections, I would say that the major thing is that right now we'll have the forced peaceful transition of power from incumbent to his rival, to his antagonist. And I think that's the most unpleasant thing for our enemy, Russia, because it was expected, and Kremlin expected, massive falsifications, and they alleged Ukrainian incumbent and Ukrainian authorities that there will be massive falsifications, electoral fraud. Nothing like that happened. All these expectations proved to be false, and actually that was the real fraud. If we speak also about the democratic nature, now we see that it's impossible to rule country without having a feedback from the people. And I think the most important lesson that the president-elect right now, the Volodymyr Zelensky, should learn and must learn tonight, that without this feedback with the people, you can lose you can lose people's trust, and you can lose power very, very rapidly.
Right. Now, would you say that Volodymyr Zelensky has the type of reputation that Russia could use against Ukraine in terms of the international sphere and how Ukraine is portrayed abroad?
Well, yes, they have to accommodate somehow to the new reality in Ukraine. However, and we can see it from the latest decisions made by the Russian government, that they would try to test the president-elect whether he is soft or hard on Russia. And maybe, as you heard, and maybe our audience have heard, that the Russian government just introduced the new sanctions, or I would say even a complete embargo on oil and oil product deliveries to Ukraine, starting effectively from the June 1st. That means that they will start from the very beginning of the Volodymyr Zelensky presidency. And that would be the major test, and they would see how a person without political experience and with unknown team, national security team, foreign policy team, how he will respond. And that, of course, will be very, very interesting to see.
What did you think so far of what Mr. Zelensky has portrayed his team to be? I believe on Ukrainian media, a few individuals have been revealed to the general public about who his team will be if he's elected president.
Well, even for experts, it remains unknown and a mystery, wrapped in enigma, as one of the very famous English politicians said. And of course, we are waiting and looking forward to his decisions and to his nominations. And of course, we are looking forward how he is going to work with the parliament and how he is going to build his relations with the parliament and how he's going to build his new party, because the party, Sluga Narodu, or the Servant of the People, is a virtual project and almost non-existent. So far he have to fill this virtual political project with the real names and with the real people and with the real experts. So this would be another major test for Volodymyr Zelensky. So I cannot right now answer your question how he will deal with Russia and with some other foreign policy stuff.
I see. So just some analysis that we've been reading online today by Sky News. Their headline reads something along the lines of Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's TV star turned politician, could uproot corrupt elites. And the subheader is Volodymyr Zelensky's electoral success is mostly down so far to the fact that he's not Petro Poroshenko. Would you say that that's accurate?
I would say to some extent it's accurate. Of course, what we have seen in the second round of voting was the protest voting. The 73% voted against the incumbent and 25% voted against the newcomer. So at the same time, we can say that the so huge amount of people who entrusted to a newcomer and to a person with no political experience is a sign that actually people are sick and tired of the ruling elite. And that would be, I would say, the third test for Volodymyr Zelensky, how he will try to drain the swamp, if we use the very famous saying invented by Trump. Because we can say for sure that the Ukrainian swamp is no less ugly than the swamp in Washington.
I see. Well, that's quite a bold comparison you just made there, making a comparison between Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Donald Trump. That's very interesting. Before we get into more of that, we'd like to show our viewers a bit more about the backstory of each of the candidates, so Petro Poroshenko and Volodymyr Zelensky. And I believe we have a very short report on that we can play for you now.
Petro Poroshenko grew up in the Moldovan city of Bendere, where his father worked. He graduated from Kyiv's Taras Shevchenko University with an international economic relations degree. He served in the army in Kazakhstan. Almost immediately after graduation, Petro Poroshenko took up business. He was engaged in the supply of cocoa beans and black pepper and earned his first $1 million that way. Now Rushen Confectionery.
The night after the first round of the presidential elections, incumbent President Petro Poroshenko invited his opponent, Volodymyr Zelensky, to a debate.
A pre-election debate should be a key element. A candidate trying to avoid it will know that he has nothing to say.
Zelensky's campaign responded that they are not sure a debate is even necessary. Ukrainians started an online flash mob called Want to See Debates. After that, Zelensky posted a video in which he agreed to the debate, but with a list of demands.
The debate will take place before the people of Ukraine. All TV channels have the right to broadcast the debates live, and all the journalists have the right to be present.
Zelensky also demanded medical tests. Poroshenko accepted the challenge and invited Zelensky to undergo medical tests at the Olympijski National Stadium.
I immediately agreed to undergo testing. I would like to introduce amendments into legislation and make the procedure mandatory, because not being addicted to drugs or alcohol is a matter of national security.
Zelensky instead went to take tests at a private clinic.
I submitted to a blood test. The doctors took everything they needed. They drained all my blood. The blood is young, so we will see.
Enter boxer Volodymyr Klitschko. He states that as an experienced athlete, he knows quite a bit about medical examinations and blood tests. He suggests both candidates submit their biological samples to the International Anti-Doping Agency.
I'm ready to pay for these tests, so that we, the citizens of Ukraine, could have a clean president. Not only his blood and urine, but more importantly, his mind.
One of the candidates agrees to the offer, Petro Poroshenko.
I emphasize it was not me who initiated our meeting in the stadium. There was a public invitation to hold the debates at the Olympijski National Complex. Thus, all the necessary tests were taken there. This was initiated by Volodymyr Zelensky.
The Central Electoral Commission also enters into the fray. According to legislation, the debate should be held before the day of electoral silence at 8 p.m. in the public broadcasting studio. Poroshenko offers to hold the debate at the Olympijski Stadium a week prior to the official debate at the public broadcaster.
Petro Poroshenko will arrive at the Olympijski Stadium to hold a debate with Volodymyr Zelensky on April 14th at 14:14. He once again invites Zelensky and asks him not to be afraid of the debate and not to avoid it.
The Zelensky campaign said that their candidate was ready for the debate, but only on April 19th. Before that, they asked another candidate from the first round to be moderator.
Yulia Tymoshenko, you came in third in the first round of elections and you did not support any of the candidates. Could you become a guarantor of fair rules and equal opportunities at the debates?
At first, Tymoshenko did not reply to Zelensky's proposal. However, she responded later. I witnessed the destruction of presidential status. I saw the humiliation of the Ukrainian state. I think that millions of Ukrainians, just like me, did not want to see this. MP Yulia Tymoshenko expressed her position after the broadcast of a talk show on which the candidates finally had a conversation. However, it was held via phone.
Майте терпець послухати мене. Майте терпець послухати мене. А зараз закінчив я. 19 числа на НСК Олімпійський. Крапка. До побачення.
On April 14th, Petro Poroshenko was the only candidate who came to the Olympijski Stadium. Instead of a debate, Poroshenko talked to his supporters. The tribune of Volodymyr Zelensky remained empty. Reported by Lyubov Zadorozhna, UATV.
So that was a quick roundup of what the past couple of weeks have been like. The two candidates trading barbs, and the big, extraordinary show, really, of the two candidates debating at Olympijski Stadium. What did you make of it, the debate itself? It was the first time in public that the two candidates spoke, seemingly to each other and to their supporters on the same stage.
Well, actually, they were speaking to their voters, and nobody of them managed to speak to the people who hesitate or who voted for other candidates. Actually, both Poroshenko and Zelensky made statements just to confirm that. Confirm and to ensure that their voters would support them in the second round, and nobody tried to speak essentially about the issues. So to sum it up, I would say that Poroshenko appealed to the message that only he can rule and govern the country, which stands against Russia, while Zelensky tried to convince his voters that he is the only hope to make a transition from the failed, corrupted elite to something new.
So you think both of the candidates didn't really appeal to the undecided voter?
No, nobody, because actually, if you look at the opinion polls, and I think their teams looked at the latest opinion polls before the runoff, and it showed that there is a very small room for maneuvering, that a lot of people are mobilized to vote against Poroshenko, and just very few people decided to vote against Zelensky. So they just tried to make sure that to appeal to their voters, to show them that they are that they are not going to change their minds. That is very important.
So strengthening their own positions and doing little to persuade undecided voters or potentially maybe attract the other camp's voters. Do you think this is a smart move?
Well, if you look at the exit poll, maybe it was a smart move for Volodymyr Zelensky.
On Zelensky's part.
Right. While Poroshenko actually failed to attract some more voters, and it's also is shown by the exit poll.
Right. I have another analysis piece here on the Independent, and the headline is, Ukraine is on the verge of a new political era, but one question remains. What is it?
Yes.
Do you think that's accurate?
Yes, I can respond it only by quoting another, I guess, American saying. If you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. And this saying can be a description of what happened tonight, and it's a kind of, I would say, maybe a good thing Volodymyr Zelensky should think of. If he doesn't show the integrity, if he doesn't show that he is not linked to Kolomoisky, to the Ukrainian oligarchs, the former owner of Privatbank, and if he didn't show that he can do his decisions based on the rule of law and on the advice of unbiased experts, then his presidency will not be as successful even as it was of his predecessor.
But do you think the fact of him being in business at the time during the whole election campaign, well, the run-up to the election campaign, of his business ties with Igor Kolomoisky, the Ukrainian oligarch, do you think that had a lot of sway with voters? Do you think it really mattered to a lot of people, you know, the ties to a Ukrainian oligarch?
First, I think not many people know about these ties. And a lot of people just didn't know how important this issue was. And maybe a lot of people were just very angry about the presidency of Petro Poroshenko. And the other side, the team of Petro Poroshenko, did not manage to explain about this threat to Ukraine. However, but we also have to admit that they didn't manage to change the course of presidency. The steps that Poroshenko has done in the last 3 weeks should have been taken in the last 8 months.
Okay, so which steps were those in the last 3 weeks?
In the last 3 weeks, he fired 2 governors without explaining why. And one of them, the Kherson governor, was linked to the murder of Katerina Handziuk, the volunteer and civil activist woman in Kherson region. Another, Odessa governor, also was fired without explanation. And these were the kind of messages that were unread by a majority of the people. He also fired some other notorious figures from intelligence services, but that was not enough. And of course, these things like fighting with corruption, removing, how to say, undecent people, let's put it, that should be done in the last 8-12 months of his presidency, and he didn't do that. It was not possible to change the flow, to change the chain of events just in the last 3 weeks.
And do you think in the end those steps, even if he didn't take them, this didn't really influence any more voters? It didn't really influence people's opinions of him, essentially. It didn't really add anything.
Maybe I would not say that he tried, and maybe that attracted some people to vote actually for him. But as I said, in 3 weeks it's impossible to gather more than he had to gather more than 3 million votes, and in 3 weeks it's just not possible.
Right. So in the first round, I believe one of the candidates, Yulia Tymoshenko, she attempted to contest the vote, and she said that that there'd been some illegal activity, and it wasn't done in a proper manner. Now, this runoff, we've received some more feedback from OSCE monitors and from various organizations that have been monitoring the election process, and they are all saying that it has been going really smoothly. There's little election voting violations, and I believe we have a soundbite from a member of the National Democratic Institute Observer for you now, so we can play that.
One thing we've observed since being here and with our observers around the country is that there seems to be a very strong commitment from people to make this election work and work well.
We have approximately under 40% of our team of 160 is of Ukrainian Canadian background. They have an interest, obviously. Other Canadians have an interest as well.
Those were not the Democratic Institute. Those were Canadian monitors, I believe, and they've all confirmed that the election process has been going smoothly. Now, would you say that there might be some attempts, perhaps by Russian agents, to somehow use this election to promote propaganda or fake messages, despite everything going as smoothly as it has now?
I think that they are actually that the Russian propaganda is actually was blown off by the results of the elections, and I would say that as a rule, serious irregularities are taking place when the races are too tight. After the first round of voting, there was very evident favorite and the incumbent. And the gap was so huge that it was not possible to even to predict that some kind of irregularities can help to tilt the result of the elections. So it's just illogical to presume the falsification could take place in this environment.
Do you think that, considering Ukraine's modern history, not a lot of presidents have been elected to a second term? Do you think that somehow also plays into how well Petro Poroshenko did?
Well, it just explains that Ukrainian people don't like when those who take power and those who promise do not live with these promises. This is the main lesson for the ruling elite, and it was the main lesson for the last 20 years. So now again our ruling elite just have another evidence that they are not governing country in the right way. And if they are not governing country in the right way, then the people have to look to some alternative. Sometimes these alternatives are good, sometimes they are not so good. But democracy is it's just how democracy works. You have to, if people are not happy with the government, then you should expect that the government would be changed.
I think Ukraine is a very good example of how people who aren't happy with how the system works do take to the streets and do protest, as we've seen during Euromaidan and even during the Orange Revolution. People have always been very vocal if they do not agree with the power with the president in charge.
Yes, but the Orange Revolution was a kind of different thing. In 2004, there was a massive falsification, and people just felt that they have been denied the access to power and their right to choose and to change the government. In 2013, 2014, there was just a very different situation. Then the incumbent, Viktor Yanukovych, decided to humiliate people and tried to make an authoritarian turn in the country and tried to build a kind of regime very similar to Belarus and Russia. And that, of course, angered a lot of people. Right now, what we have, and what I again have to stress, that today we are in the beginning of the forced, peaceful transition of power from one leader to another.
Why do you think this election is seen as such a high-stakes race?
Well, because Ukraine is facing very difficult issues. First, the war with Russia and the occupation of certain territories of Donbass and the Crimean Peninsula. Second, the growing poverty and the growing emigration from the country due to their sluggish economic development. And third, the impunity of the political class and the absence of fair treatment of the people. So these are three issues that actually helped Zelensky in this or other way to get elected. And
but the interesting point is that none of these things, he's actually not said how he's going to face any of these major issues that you've just listed. The war in the East, returning Crimea, he has not said a single word. Well, he's probably said a few words about it, but he hasn't provided a strategy or even any sort of framework on how he plans to go about this.
You are very right when saying this, because these elections are not his victory. This is the defeat of the politicians who were responsible for this country, and not only for the president but also for the people who were in the parliamentary coalition for all these years and who made decisions in the parliament. So they lost people's trust, and people have to look to some other alternative. As I said, sometimes you have good alternative and sometimes you don't. Personally, I don't think that Zelensky is a good alternative. But still, all other politicians, they did not manage, they failed to persuade people that they know how to do this. And of course, they failed to explain people that beginning from the May 2019, they will treat Ukrainian people differently. So that was the main problem, beginning from Poroshenko to Tymoshenko and to some other guys.
I see. Now, what do you make is going to happen in the parliamentary elections? What's your take? Do you think the election results, how will that kind of break up the parliament and mix the different parties and potentially create new coalitions?
So I think that the old politicians would try somehow not maybe to unite their efforts, but of course they would start to attack the new president and try whether he is competent or incompetent, whether he's soft or hard on different issues. And because, as you see from the results of the runoff and the so huge difference between the newcomer and incumbent, so it's also should be an alarming signal to all other politicians, because that means that they can be defeated so hugely in October that they have somehow to either to accommodate to Zelensky presidency and to help him to run the country, or maybe they can choose to go into total opposition against him and try to frustrate his voters. So in the next few months we will see how the parliament would react to the Zelensky presidency, and one of the first processes and decision-making processes in the parliament would be the budgetary process. And from this point we will see what will be the ways and means of parliamentary factions and how they will accommodate or whether they will fight with the new president.
So you think the way the budget will be planned, you think that will be a sort of litmus test on how the different fractions and coalitions will form and who is going to really support the president, the new president, and who's going to be against
Yes, the budgetary process, and of course we should look very closely at how whether the parliament decides to change the electoral law, the law on elections of the parliament. Zelensky already promised that he is for the proportional system, that he wants to change the electoral system. But actually in the parliament we have almost 200 people who are elected in majority constituencies. And it will be very interesting to see what will be the negotiation process between Zelensky team and these majority district deputies and other political factions. And if the new law is passed, then it can be a signal, a message to the Ukrainian people that the new president has found the ways how to communicate with the parliament and how to advance his initial promises.
Well, I'm sure a few interesting, very interesting weeks ahead for all of us to watch. Thank you very much for coming into the studio today.
Thank you for the invitation.
So that was Petro Burkovskiy, analyst at the Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation, and you're watching UATV's coverage of the presidential election 2019. Stay tuned for more.